Hey everyone, this demo is to show you how to create CSS and HTML that is responsive to different screen sizes, specifically uh, designs that will change when you look at them on mobile devices. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up your primary style sheet, which you've been working on, and we are also going to add a second style sheet that will only apply when the display screen gets to a certain size, whether it's the browser window or whether it's the screen of a mobile device. So to get started, I've got my project open here in brackets. I'm currently on my main index.html file. I have my main CSS file here. We're not going to work with that just yet, but what we are going to do is in our same primary directory, we are going to make a new file, and we're going to make a CSS file called narrow.css. Narrow meaning like a narrow screen or a narrow view area. So we'll call this narrow.css, and then I'm going to change one simple thing in my narrow CSS, which is going to be the body color. This way I will be able to see that the change happens later in the next step when I add the parameters for adjusting the style based on the size of the screen. So in narrow.css, again, just changing color in order to confirm that something's working. I'm going to change the color of the type, and let's just make it aquamarine. Okay, so in narrow.css, it's going to change the body color to aquamarine. You'll notice in the main.css, the way that we've been working, the color here is fuchsia. Of course, many of you have changed yours to other things by now, but this will give us a sense that once we write the tag that we need to write in order to change the style sheet for the display size, we'll know that it's working. So first, let's hit our preview button here to open our window. I'm getting this alert here because I just put in lorem ipsum text, and so it keeps asking if I want to translate. That's all that is. And of course, then you have like all your weekly updates that you've been making. I know many of you have been adding like images to these, which is fantastic to see. I really want you to like own this as it goes along. Keep in mind, mine is just the most like basic stripped down stuff so that we can focus on these technical demos. I want you to get in and play and mess stuff up and then fix it later, but just keep trying stuff. So anyway, I've got my week 8 update, my little synopsis here. I've already made the index page. We'll get to that in a second. First, what we're going to do is we are going to write a style sheet link just the same as what we've been working with. So we'll do link and then rel equals style sheet, and this is so that we can specifically say what the relationship of this document is to the other. So we're saying this thing that we're linking to, it's a style sheet. That way the HTML page knows to treat it like a style sheet. Now, here's where this line is going to get a little bit different. What we're going to do is we're going to add a media attribute, and we're going to say media equals screen, the word and, then in parentheses, we're going to say max hyphen width colon 1000 pixels. We'll close the parenthesis. The quote is already there for us. Then we'll hit space, and then we'll type in the href, which is the hyperlink reference, equals narrow.css, which is the name of our file. And then we will close this tag. Okay, let me open this up just a little bit to show you. So it's almost exactly the same as what we did before, except we added this attribute here, where we're saying like only use this style sheet if it's on the screen. And you can set up different style sheets for printing. So if you've ever been to a website and clicked print and noticed that when it starts to print, you're seeing a different layout of the page, that's something you can do in a style sheet. You can define a different style sheet for what this page should look like when you go to print it out. If you want to know more about that, you can totally Google it and see how it works. The premise is exactly the same as what we're doing here. The difference being here, we're not worried about printing. Instead, what we're worried about is this screen size. So what I have here is href equals narrow.css. The reason that these files are called CSS is that stands for cascading style sheet. Cascading meaning like one, then the next, then the next, like the way that water cascades down a waterfall. What that means for us is when this CSS file is used, anything that's in here will overwrite anything that's in here because it comes after. And if we were to do another one, then it would overwrite anything that comes before. So we have written in narrow.css for our font color to change in the body. But you'll notice that's the only thing we've changed. We've only changed the color. So it's not replacing this whole entire file. It's just overwriting this one parameter of this one selector. So it's not going to change background color. It's not going to change margin. It's not going to change font family. It's not going to change any of this stuff here unless we tell it to. It's only going to change this one parameter of this one thing. This is really beneficial because in our narrow.css, we only have to change the things that we want to change when the screen size is different. So how do we test this out? I hit save. I've already got my live preview open, and you'll notice here's my browser. Now, something that I can do is I can simply start changing the size of the browser. And once I get down to 1,000 pixels wide or less, you'll notice my type color changed to aquamarine. And then once it's greater than 1,000 pixels, you'll notice it changes back to fuchsia. One of the reasons that Chrome is so powerful as a tool within our development, within our learning, and even within the build out of these things, if you're working on actual production ready sites, is that Chrome has developer tools. And these are incredibly handy for a variety of reasons. One of which is if you go to View, Developer Tools, it gives you some information over here where you can see the code and the content side by side. You know, we have brackets over here, but different situations, different environments, different programming applications, this can be very useful. One other benefit that we have in Chrome is that we can toggle the mobile view, or it calls it the device view, sorry. And so when you click this on, it gives you the best sort of guess at what the size is going to be for like iPad versus the different iPhones. You know, so here we can see like, what does it look like on an iPhone 6 versus an iPhone 10 versus an iPad and so on. So this gives us a bit of a sense of like, how is this page going to display when it loads on this device? And this is really handy. It's really handy for things like, for example, when I go to now week 8, you'll notice that like, this is what week 8 looks like on a Pixel. Looks fine in a browser, right? But there's things that I want to do in order to ensure that week 8 is going to look better than this when it displays on a mobile device. So let's start by grabbing our link from here. So I can copy this. So I've already written this out. I'm just going to copy it and I'm going to paste it into the head of my week 8 index.html, which I already made. Mine simply has 2 half divs in it, which we had made in a previous demo. So whatever your week 8 page is looking like, and you could apply this to any week, but I'm going to do week 8 because that's where we are in the semester. So I've made sure to apply it after my main.css, but then also remember that when we linked our main CSS, we had to use this .. which means go up one level and look for the file. So my index.html file for week 8 is inside the week 8 folder. In order to get to the narrow.css file, I have to go up one level in the directory structure to find it. So I have to add that here. So I do .. And then when I hit save, you'll notice again that like now when my window hits that 1,000 pixel point, it changes the color of the text. So let me turn developer tools back on just because it makes it a little bit easier. So a couple things about this is I can already see that with this half div, which worked great with images, now that it's got text in there, I'm seeing that I want to add some padding so that this text is not bumping right up against each other. I'm going to do that in main.css because I want this to apply to everything. So I'm going to say padding, let's say like 10 pixels. Oops, 10 px there. That's pretty good. Maybe 5 more. We'll do 15. Okay, so you can see here, if I pull this ahead a little bit, let's see, where can I? Yeah, we can shrink that one down and pull that open. So you can see here that I've added the padding, which padding goes on the inside of the div. However, you'll notice that my half is now taking up more than half, forcing the second div to like wrap down in the stacking order there. And that's because of this setting, which we played with before, called box sizing, border box. I'm going to copy that from my grid item. You could also type it out. So the box sizing border box, again, this setting here makes it so that when it determines the size of this box, it takes the padding into account. So now instead of it being 50% plus 15 pixels of padding plus this other 15 pixels of padding on the width, instead, this is 50% and it subtracted the padding from that. So now my 50% divs fit. However, when I start looking at this on a gadget, you can see like, oh no, this doesn't work at all. I don't want 2 divs here. Instead, I would want this div, each of these divs, to take up the full width. And I also need to increase this point size, because even on like a reasonably new iPhone, like that's just not acceptable. Nobody's going to read that. So what we're going to do is in the narrow.css, we're going to update the .half class. So I'm going to the narrow.css, which is already linked to my week 8 index.html. It's already adjusting the body color because it's less than 1,000 pixels because of that setting. So I know that it's working. So now if I do half, let's set the width to be 100%. And there we can see it's taking up the full width. And then also in the body for this, I think this type is a little small. So I'm going to adjust the font size so that it is 2 times the size of the end user's settings. We talked a little bit about the different font sizes before, but just as a refresher, you can set the font size as a pixel size, so it gives you an approximate height, and that's pretty close to what we use when we utilize point sizes in like the Adobe software. So pixel sizes, point sizes, they're pretty close in relationship. However, if we start using the 1em, which you can do fractions, you can do like, you can play around with like 1.5 em or 1 em or 2.25, whatever. You get the idea. This doesn't have to be a whole number. You can use a fraction in here. What this does is by using the em, it sets the size of the font based on the end user device's preferences. So instead of forcing someone to look at 12-point type or 8-point type, for example, maybe I have my font set at 8-point because I have really good glasses and I have a larger phone, but maybe somebody with a vision impairment or, somebody who's a little bit older, or just for any reason from comfort to varying abilities, somebody might have their device's font size set larger so that they can see it better. Using EM takes that into account. So there's some important things there with accessibility. As we're designing for the screen, we are not looking at pixel accuracy anymore. Instead, we're designing systems that are fluid and fluctuating, similar to what we're seeing here. So now I've got my divs are taking up the full width when the size of the screen is small. But then if I turn off the device view and open up the screen, you can see it goes right back to being the same, like 2 columns where each div is taking up half, just like what it was before. So I'll shrink this back down, go back into my developer tools, set this back to a device view so that I can see it. The other thing here is like, I'm noticing these are a little bit close, so I'm going to fiddle with this just a little bit more to add a little bit more space, a little bit more padding. So I'm adding a border bottom, but I'm only doing it for this narrow view. So let's add like 40 pixels. That's a little bit more comfortable. Maybe it needs to be a little bit more. And again, these could be percentages. You could use view height, things like that. But this is the main thing that I want to get across, is that now when you have your narrow.css, you have a different set of style sheet parameters that only apply when the screen gets down below this certain width. And you can play with it. You can adjust it and see what happens at different widths. And so now we have this in our week 8, But if you want, the best thing to do would be to go back through and add it to your other weeks as well. And it'll change the things on that page then when that is smaller. So hopefully that gives a little bit of insight into how you can start designing for responsive screen-based work. This is something that's crucial, as the numbers have shown over the last decade, essentially, that more and more people access more and more aspects of the web on their phone. And that is only going to continue to increase. So when we're designing for the screen, we have to think about this type of flexibility so that as we're putting things out, they work not only on laptops and large screens, but they also work on tablets and mobile devices. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's helpful. I would like you to play with this and get it applied to all of your pages. As always, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out.